Hi, good morning, and welcome everybody to the Big IDEA, the Parent Academy at OCPS. I am Soren Richardson, and I will be presenting a workshop to you, a guide to an IEP that works. It is my pleasure being here today and sharing this information with you. My journey on special education started about 8 years ago when my son was born, and he happens to have Down syndrome, and he is the reason that I am walking on this path alongside with you, and I am able to share with you some personal and professional information. So before we jump into the workshop, let me share about F&D. F&D is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and we are federally funded through the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health. We, because of this, we are giving all the services to families for free. We never charge. We are the statewide parent training information center and the statewide family to family health information center. So we have three PTIs in the state of Florida. The one that I work for, Penn. I am the co-director for Penn Parent Education Network. We serve families here in Orange County. F&D is family driven. We were founded in 1985 by parents of children with disabilities who came together for mutual support and sharing of information. We are a national network of individuals of all ages that may be at risk or have a disability. So that means that we support families from with children with disabilities from birth to up to age 22, but we also serve professionals in the same field. One of the things that makes F&D very unique is the majority of our board members, management staff, and field staff, we have a child with a disability or identify as a person that have a disability, which means that we offer you that lived experience as a parent. Disclaimer is we are not attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals. We provide you peer to peer support. We provide you with information and resources that are research based and vetted, and the support through workshops like this or through one on one support to help you better navigate special education here in the state of Florida. We also collaborate with different school districts and with different agencies, so as bees, Project Plan, Fiddlers. So here on the end of my screen, you can see all the programs that are operated on the FFND. We have Poppin, which is the PTI in the northern part, PSN, which is the PTI in the west side, and PEN, which is the program that I work for. We serve 12 counties from Key West up to the East Coast into Central Florida. And like I mentioned before, Orange County is one of them. Our project, Family Star, is the family to family project, and they support children and young adults that have medical complex needs and mental health challenges. All right, so let's dive into the workshop. So let's start with IDEA. What is that? IDEA is the Individuals with Education Act. Um, that is a federal law that ensures that services to children with disabilities throughout the nations. So IDEA governs how states and public agencies like school districts provide early intervention, special education, and related services to eligible infants, toddlers, and children and youth with disabilities, right? So, what does this mean? This means that they make sure that public schools that serve the educational needs of students with disabilities, that they give these services for free, and that they can receive all the special education services they need into their IEP. All right, so let's talk about the six principles of IDEA. We see on the screen, we see there are six principles. Let's go through them briefly. The first one is FAPE, free appropriate education, and this makes sure that the special education and related services uh, is always provided for free by public expenses. It has to meet standards and are appropriate and provide in conformity with IEP. An individualized education plan. This means that once that student meets the criteria under IDEA for special education services, the IEP team will begin developing the IEP. Now, the other principle, which is very important as well, is parent and student participation. It is required and expected that parents and children play a role in the development and the implementation of the IEP. Then we have appropriate evaluation. So we want to make sure that these evaluations are research and evidence based, data driven to determine whether a child with a disability has the right to special education, right? So there is a time frame. It has to be conducted within 60 days of parental consent. Then we're talking about least restrictive environment. So this means that according to IDEA, schools are required to educate children with disabilities with children who are not disabled to the maximum extent possible. And then the last one is procedure safeguard. So these are a set of regulated guidelines designed to protect the rights of parents and children with a disability, and at the same time it gives families and the school system several mechanisms on how to resolve dispute. So dispute happens, is natural process. We always want to resolve conflict at the lowest level possible. So these procedural safeguards are disseminated annually, and you're supposed to get one every year when you do your IEP meeting. Now, I want to touch real quick on the word inclusion. So inclusion is not really mentioned in IDEA. However, we talk about inclusion all the time. Now, FAPE, free appropriate education, and the least restrictive environment, those two things are what makes inclusion possible. So we make sure that students with disabilities that they have access to all the services they need for free in the least restrictive environment, which means we begin in general education. Those two components makes inclusion. Now, here on the screen, you can see a definition of an IEP, right? IEP is that blueprint, it's a document that lays out the plan of action that's going to make sure that your child is provided a quality education. In here, we're going to see all the services, the technology, the specialized instructions that your child is going to need, but it also gonna um, say how they're gonna be accessing education with their peers. Who is part of the IEP team? First and foremost, the parent. You are 50% of the IEP team, and this is written in IDEA. Whether you are one person, you're two-person, or you have a whole team behind you, you are 50% the team. Please remember, you know your child's best. You've been your child's first teacher. So you can share strategies that may or may not work. Write your parental input. All those things that you're concerned about, you can write them down. We're going to come back to that. The school has to make sure to accommodate the the parents. So if the parent needs an other date, other time, another platform, the school has to be able to accommodate the parent so they can have meaningful participation. Then we also have the student. Parents may bring their child at any age they want to an IEP meeting for as long as they feel it's appropriate. We also have the ESC teacher, which stands for Exceptional Student Education Teacher. The General Education teacher has to be there too if your child is receiving um, services in both settings. We have the local education agency, which is also known as the staffing specialist. This is the person that represents the school district and is authorized to make decisions on approving services. If your child have had any evaluations done, please make sure that that person is there to interpret those test results, or have somebody that is in the same discipline to interpret those. If English is not your first language and you require translation, you have the right under IDEA to request for professional language interpreter and others. You can bring whoever you want to the table um, to um, to uh, to be with you on the IEP meeting. It could be your parents, it could be an advocate, it could be your neighbor, a private therapist, whoever can provide information on your child can be invited to your meeting. All right, so let's say we're starting talking about the IP, right? So for in this context, we need to talk first about RTI and MTSS. So RTI is response to intervention, and it's a framework for many schools to use to help students who are struggling with academics. Okay, so this response to intervention, it's a three-tiered education approach aimed to early identification and support of students whose learning needs are not being met. So all students are in tier one, whether you have a disability or not. Maybe your child is just a little behind, struggling with reading or math. This is maybe where they do small groups, push in, pull outs, and then when they catch up, they don't need those services. So for those that still need services, they can move up to tier two. And then if they need more restrictive services, then they move them to tier three, and this could be like a 101 or whatever is appropriate for the child. Now, let's talk about MTSS. So MTSS stands for the multi-tier system of support. This is more comprehensive than the RTI. It includes more than just academics like the RTI did. Under the MTSS umbrella, it covers social and emotional support. It covers behavior support. So the behavior plan can be included here. It also can include support for adults, for the teachers, so they can have professional development, so they can better support students that are struggling. All right, so let's move on to the pre-referral. So pre-referral is, you can see it maybe that's where the MTSS process begins, right? There is some struggle, so we're going to see how we can support the student. What kind of strategies do we need to support them in the general education settings? So we're going to use the data from the MTSS to bring all that together. So in case that that's not supporting the child enough and we need further support, that's when we're going to move to the referral stage. This is the intervention has proven not to be successful, and we are going to be referring the student for special education services. The referral can come from parents, daycare professionals, nurses, doctors, or even the school themselves. This is where they're gonna set up a meeting, talk to the parents, and the parents need to sign the referral in order to start the evaluation process. So when we have all that behind us and the assessments are carried out to determine whether the child has a disability that requires special education, this is where I want to talk real briefly about the difference between a medical diagnosis and a educational eligibility. So a student that has a medical diagnosis, whether it could be autism, Down syndrome, whatever that could be, dyslexia, they need to be negatively impacting the education. And that's when we're going to be looking at an IEP. A student can have a medical diagnosis, but it's not impacting their education, their behavior in school, or any other aspect. In those cases, they don't need a IEP. So once we're going through that stage of the IEP process, we're going to be discussing different kind of assessments, performance in school, at home, and a lot of input is going to be brought to the table. We're also going to be talking about what are the child's strengths and needs, and based on all this information, and of course, also based on the data driven approach from the assessment that we have done that are evidence based, we are going to be determine the eligibility. And once it's determined that this child is eligible for special education, the team is moving into developing of the IEP. Once the IEP is written and they're going to look at all the areas of concern, developing goals, and have everybody's input, they're going to move on to implementing this IEP. At this stage is where they're going to make sure that all the accommodations that the students need for whether it's testing or instructions are in place, and all the services that the child needs are being arranged, and all the therapists are being informed and brought onto the table. The last step in the special education process is the evaluation and review. So once the IEP is developed, right, it requires accountability and consistent follow-up by the child's parents, but also by the school. So by annually having an IEP meeting, reviewing the IEP, reviewing the goals and the benchmarks, and seeing if everything is moving along, what needs to be changed and adjusted, can be done in that IEP meeting. Also, at least every 3 years, there's going to be evaluations done again to see where the baseline and if everything is still needed and in place. Let's move to the 8 parts of the IEP itself. So we have the present levels of performance. This is where we are going to be, the IEP team is going to be describing what are the child's strengths and what are the areas of concern, and how does the disability affect his progress and the general education. These All this information has to be data driven based on assessment, but also it can include homework, schoolwork, progress data, and observation. Then we're going to move to the part where it must contain goals and an explanation of how the progress toward goals and objectives are being measured. But also, we need to be reading in the IEP, how is this information being reported to the parents? So maybe it's progress report, right? Every 9 weeks. The third component is explanation of how progress towards goals and objectives will be measured, right? And describe how that information will be reported to parents. Then we also need to be able to see how and which specially designed instructions and related services will the child receive in order to meet his educational need. The length of time and location where these services will be provided also must be described in the IEP. We also need to read about least restrictive environment in the classroom. Where is this child going to be? What's the placement of this child? How many times, how many minutes is the student going to be participating in a general education program with typical peers? And if so, if not, it has to have an explanation. Also, the the accommodation and modification that the students need, sorry, needs to be in the IEP. The IEP also must include a projected beginning and end date of services. Usually, this is like the day that the IEP is signed till the next year, and the frequency of the services and where they will be delivered. And last but not least, once the child turns 12 or in seventh grade, whatever comes first, they must include measurable goals for the students' anticipated post secondary program. So, we're going to go a little bit more in details in these pieces in a little bit. First of all, let's talk about present levels of performance. This is where we're going to be writing the students' strengths and areas of concern on those five domains. So your IEP is usually built up by these five domains. Wherever there are concerns, it could include all, or maybe just two or four. It depends where your child needs support. So, for each domain, you're going to have a present level that belongs to that domain. This is where we're going to write what are the strengths, what are the area of concern based on data. So for curriculum and learning environment is where we are going to be writing about your child's current ability on academic level. How is your child interpret information? And the preferred learning style will also be documented in this area. For instance, one of the goals that my child had is can his his current ability when he was in pre-K, he was able to identify 4 out of the 10 um, 10 colors. So 4 is his strength, and then area of concern is he still doesn't know the rest, right? So social emotional is where we're going to be looking at how does your child interact with their peers? How is their behavior? How does how does their disability affect the way that they're able to interact with their peers? Also, here we can put goals for self advocacy. For instance, if we need to teach your child to take a break, ask for a break. Um, that can all go here, and self determination as well. Under independent functioning is where we're going to be looking at how well does your child complete tasks independently, homework assignments, dressing, eating. And for those little ones that are not potty trained yet, this is also where we can put goals for them. Domains D is healthcare. So if your child required any health specific need at school, that's going to be addressed in this domain. And the last domain is going to be for communication. How are your child's receptive and expressive language? Does they understand language? Does they follow one or two-step verbal command? All these preferred method of communication, if they have assistive technology, it's all going to be documented in here. So I mentioned earlier potty training and dressing and independent functioning. So IDEA is more than just academics. IDEA says that we want to prepare students with disabilities for further education, in the, employment, and independent living. So, with this end goal in mind, how do we prepare our children to be successful in these three areas? So, all these things are things that we can address in our IEP. Let's talk about goals. Goals have to be smart, they have to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So, of course, they have to be specific, written clearly, defining IEP goals and objective for what should happen. We want to be measuring one thing at a time, right? Specific criteria, not saying reading 20 sides while uh, sitting for 5 minutes quietly. What are we measuring? Are we measuring sitting or measuring sidewards? So you want to be specific, you want to be able to measure that one area that you are um, writing a goal on. It has to be attainable, so it should be reached, and it has to be realistic. So the goal may be attainable, but is it realistic? And if it isn't realistic, it will never be attainable. So we have to keep these two closely in mind. And also timely, right? We need to know what is the time frame for each time frame for reaching each goal. For instance, is it going to be end of the semester or is it going to be end of the school year? Um, Explanation of progress. So we talked about the IEP meeting, but beside IEP meeting, you also have other moments throughout the year that you can um, monitor progress. For instance, parent-teacher conferences. Having a open and constant line of communication with your child's teachers and your school is beneficial for the partnerships that you have with them by setting expectations. For instance, at the beginning of school year, always tell my teacher, I'm going to be attending every parent teacher conference, and I would like to receive ahead of time the data collected for the progress report. That way, I can review in my own time, formulate my questions, and better understand the process on um, how do they collect the data for my child. So keep in mind that the IEP is a legal document and it must be implemented with fidelity, right? So you do have the right to request evidence of implementation by reviewing frequently the progress. You will get a hang of it, and you will find that if something is not working, is either the IEP needs to be reviewed or the IEP is not being implemented with fidelity. We have different services that can be provided under an IEP. We have specialized instructions, related services, supplemented services. So where does these services come from, right? So if you recall, we talked into at the present levels of performance that this is where we write strengths, but also areas of concern. So, whenever there is an area of concern in your present level of performance, there has to be a goal following up. That goal, there has to be a goal like how are we going to address that area of concern. So once we have the goal for that area of concern, we need to look at what do we need to put in place for the students to be successful achieving this goal. This is where we're going to be looking at specialized instructions, related services, or supplemental services that need to be here to support the child. Placement. So I mentioned placement briefly earlier, and this goes hand in hand with least restrictive environment. At the beginning, I said that IDEA talks about least restrictive environment, where we always have to start in the general education and try everything possible before moving to more restrictive settings. So the least restrictive environment is general education classroom. And then we have different options and settings or combinations that are possible for specialized instruction. For instance, we can do pull out of the classroom, the general classroom, or pull in. Then we also have, they can go to the research room, therapy room, library, any other setting within the school. But that is pull out. There's minutes that's been taken out of general education. Then we also have the ESC classroom, also known as the self-contained classroom. This is where the student will be all day receiving all their services and their curriculum. Moving into more restrictive environments are the ESC or alternative schools, hospital homebounds, but also residential schools. Accommodation and modification sometimes can be it's very close to each other. So that's why we like to put it in here and talk briefly about it. It's about making the right choice, right? So an accommodation is when the student um, needs something extra to complete the same assignment as their typical peers. So it could be maybe extra timing, formatting, the setting where they're going to do it, and scheduling, or response and our presentation. So, for instance, they need extra time for tests or assignments. Maybe a student who is blind is taking the Braille version of a test, or a student is taking a test alone. So the standard is the same for everybody. Now, when we're talking about modification, this is when we're modifying the curriculum, and the student is doing a different work on a part of the standard, or is doing a alternate assignment, and this is also known as access point. Modification is for those students that have most significant needs, and it all other accommodations need to be completed before the decision, the team IEP team decision is made to put a student on access point. So when we talk about amount and duration, right, of services, we need to know exactly what services. So we're talking about speech. It's speech and it's a speech or it's a language. So speech therapy. Who's giving it? This SLP. Where? When? So where is in the classroom or in the resource room? When will it be done? Um, how many? Is it twice a week, 3 times a week? How often? Is it a push in, pull in? Is it individual or is it in a group? And for how long the duration? So all these questions that you see, the answers you want to see in your specify on your IEP. All right. So special factors. There is a wide wide range of special needs, right? So therefore, there are many different types of related services. So related services might meet a student's school transportation requirements or help with his or her social emotional needs. So, as with special education, related services are not meant to be a one size fit all solution and are not disability specific. So, remember, this is an IEP. It has to be individualized for the students. So, in addition to all the factors and the components that we have discussed so far, there are areas that must be considered by every IEP team according to IDEA. So, the IDEA lists 5 special factors that the IEP team must consider in the development, review, and revision of each child's IEP. So here on the screen, you can see all the special factors that needs to be considered in an IEP development. So transition, I believe I mentioned it earlier a little bit. Um, for the When a child turns 12 or in 7th grade, whatever comes first, we're gonna start talking about transition. In Florida, transition starts at age 12. The federal mandate in IDEA is 16. Florida is doing better, and we start at age 12. So, this is when we're going to start talking about what are the areas that the student is interested in, and what are the skills that we can start honing on, right? Maybe we can do more. Post course of study depending what the student wants to do. um, we also want to touch on age of majority. So when the student turn 18, they gain all legal rights, which also means decisions for themselves, and that parents are no longer invited to an IEP meeting. So therefore, it's important to very young on start practicing and talking to your student, to your child, about having you, if it's appropriate, at the IEP table. Talk about self-advocacy and self-determination of instructions or the provision of information in the area of self-determination. So another area is the extended school year. ESY, as we call it. So, ESY is a decision made by the IEP team to educate a child beyond the typical school year. And this one is also free, there's no cost for the parent. Eligibility for ESY should be determined by the IEP team on the individual basis. Um, it's good to mention that ESY is not summer school. So on this slide, you can see all the factors that can be considered when discussing eligibility for ESY. So, coming towards the end of this presentation, I want to remind you that it is a process. It is important to understand the process, research, learn about the IEP process, learn about IDEA. I have put in the chat a small link. When you click on it, it has tons and tons of resources on it. Reach out to us here at FND to help you understand all these components and how you can be a better advocate for your child. You have to be able to understand so you can so you can have meaningful participation and making informed decisions for your child. That also includes asking questions. Don't leave that meeting feeling that you don't understand everything. Ask questions, Planning ahead of time. Write your parental input by the domains, all the strengths and all the strategies and all the areas of concern that you are seeing at home. Write those down so you can share in that IEP meeting. And of course, keep track of the progress, evaluate, and record any changes that you see in your child's activities and behavior at home. Share these with your teacher. Be a team and collaborate together. Because if they know what's happening at home, we can understand, they can understand what's happening in the classroom. Remember, behavior is communication. So, what are they trying to tell us? So, if we can have that all across the board and understand what's happening, it would support the child better. A couple of things for success, like I mentioned already, is build a relationship with your team, your school team. They're going to be there with you. Build a collaborative communication with them. Also, be involved. Be involved with the PTA. Be involved with the school and support in any way you can. Attend all the meetings and also organize your records, whether that's a hard copy version of your records, or nowadays everything is digital. You can have your Google Drive and have folders by year, by IEP, a folder for an IEP, folder for progress report and data, and that way you keep all your data together. Finally, what do you bring to the IEP meeting? Your IEP binder, whether that's digital or hard copy. You can bring your partner, you can bring a friend. It is an emotional. It is not easy to hear all the things that your child is not doing well. So bring that support. You can also bring an advocate. It's your right. Um, Bring your current IEP plan. Of course, bring your questions and bring any strategies that you think that's gonna work with you for the school. Also, I always like to share a story about my child. So it is more personal and have everybody involved into the vision that I have for my child. I want him to be a meaningful member of society. I want him to have a work of his choosing, a career, and really be integral part of society. So share that and make everybody go along with you in that goal that you have for your child. And if you need us, please reach out to us at F&D. We are here to support you. We are here to guide you through the special education program process. On this screen to wrap up, you can see all the programs that are operated under F&D. We have the three PTIs that I shared at the beginning. We have Papin at the northern part, PSN in the east side, and PAN in the um, from Key West up to the east side into Central Florida, and Orange County is one of the counties that we serve. Family Star is the project that supports families with children and young adults with mental health challenges and medical complex needs. We have the F&D Trust and the Advocates. On this slide, you can see all the ways that you can contact us, also some resources. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have also in Spanish. On our Facebook page, we have one specifically for our project PEN. We have over 500 videos in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And on the last slide here, I would like for you to take a screenshot if needed. You can see our physical address and our phone number, 800-825-5736. And our main email address is fnd@fndusa.org. And if you need any support, please click on the link and you will be able to you will be able to contact with me. I think I have a question in the chat, but I cannot see. Oh yeah, I can see. What are FBA? Okay, FBA is a functional behavior assessment, and a BIP is a behavior intervention plan. So if your child needs support with behavior support, this and the strategies are not enough, this is when you have to request. You requested via email, you request for an FBA to be conducted. This is where they're going to be collecting data and come up with strategies so that can be implemented in the classroom for the teachers and all supporting staff to follow, and that's what they're going to be putting in a behavior intervention plan. And if you need any more support or any more questions, you have anything else, please contact me. Um, Check on the chat. In the chat, I put the link, and that's where you can find my contact information. Thank you.